EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II, and I'm joined by none other than our Eagles insider, John McMullen. How are you feeling today, sir?
Doing well. Long days. The grind continues, my friend. It continues.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys continue to hit that like button. Make sure you guys stay engaged in the content. Comment below in the live chat. We really care about what you guys think, more so me than John. But make sure you guys continue to stay engaged in the content. Also, if you want more from John in terms of articles and any of his writings and his projects, make sure you guys check him out on JAKIBSports.com. That's JAKIB Sports.com. He's giving you
Get
guys
me in trouble,
rundown.
by the way, Tom. Already getting me in trouble.
He's giving you guys the full rundown. John, you know I care about you, man. And the last thing I want to do is get you in trouble. That's the last thing I want to do.
Well, you already did, man. I'll get over it, though. I'll get over it.
You're a tough cookie. You're a strong guy. You've heard worse.
I've heard much worse, yes.
Right. So let's get right into it. So, you've been down there at the NovaCare complex. The Kelly Green jerseys got released. And
Did they?
Yes.
I hadn't heard. Yeah, there's one thing I get in trouble.
Okay. Let's start there now. I know D Gunn. He doesn't care at all for the Kelly Green jerseys.
I don't care, good or bad. I'm completely indifferent. Like, I don't get it. Like, so many fans are more jacked up about that than the actual football team. I'll never understand it, but what? Hey, like what you like. That's what I say. But I can't. Jody and I say it. Reuben Frank is the one who said it, so I give Reuben credit. And I said, you know what? He's 100% right. I could sit and watch the Eagles game, and I'm focused on the game. I'm focused on the action. And if you came to me a half hour after the game and said, what were they wearing? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. Doesn't matter to me. Does not matter. Matter.
You mean to tell me there's no classic jersey from any team that that gets you excited?
Does not matter. Does not matter. My buddy Jeff Kerr, they gave, I don't know, they gave them, I don't think they gave them, but they gave like John Clark, buddy of the show, Birds 365. He got, he's a TV guy. He got the jersey, and Jeff Kerr's like, did you get a jersey? I'm like, what are you talking about? No, they're not giving us jerseys. And if they did, I'd give it back, by the way. I don't care.
That's a good way to stay objective as well. Do not take any gifts.
Well, that's the point.
Cover.
That's the point. Well, no, they give us gifts. I have no problem. They'll give us like a salute to service pin or something like that. Today was Military Day. That's fine. But no swag, no.
So
if I get anything Eagles, it's immediately given away. Immediately.
Yeah, or that pass to get into the building, that's the only thing you'll accept.
Pretty much.
So a lot happened today. A lot of people spoke to the media. You and I were talking about it off air. Guys like Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis, Rashad Penny, Josh Sweat, Zach McPherson. A lot of guys spoke today. I'm curious, before we get into the play on the training camp field, I'm curious to know, was there anything that stood out to you today from any of the young guys, specifically guys like Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean? Because those two guys in particular, you can even throw Rashad Penny in there as well. There's a lot of pressure on those particular guys. Rashad Penny to stay healthy, Jordan Davis and his conditioning and being able to make an impact in year two. Nakobe Dean coming in as it stands right now, that starter for the middle linebacker position, the green dot guy. So is there anything in particular, anything of significance that you heard from these guys that maybe the people would like to hear?
Well, I think, with Rashad, obviously it's always the injury issues. And he mentioned, today he's trying to lose weight. He wants to get back down to his college weight, maybe a little less wear and tear. The way the Eagles do business is helping him. We talk about it all the time. The Eagles don't practice a lot. And when they do practice, it's really quick. And they get their work done. They get off the field and guys can get their bodies right. It's about managing that more than anything else. So maybe that's helpful to them. But, with the Rashad Penny stuff, I think that's helpful with, soft tissue injuries, things like that, which you can kind of manage and but if somebody's going to tear their ACL, break their fibula, I don't know. I don't know how you stop that. Dallas Goedert was talking about that when he broke the glenoid bone in his shoulder on what was an illegal play. When a 300-pound guy falls on you, what are you going to do? If he falls on your right, he falls on your right. There's not much you can do about that. So part of it is luck, which is a word that football coaches don't necessarily want to hear, but they realize it exists. And that's why when you talk about making runs to the Super Bowl, so much is out of your control. So Nick constantly preaches control what you can control. Hardly it's about the 6,000th time I've heard that from a football coach, but it rings true. It's all you can do. Control what you can control. The Eagles do it better than most. But Nick also spoke today and probably said it 4 or 5 times during his press conference. Pads aren't on yet. Pads aren't on yet. And specifically when it's offensive linemen, defensive linemen, running backs, linebackers, the physicality, you can gauge the 7-on-7 guys. You can gauge the quarterback, the receivers, the defensive backs, the linebackers in coverage. But when it comes to, stopping the run, you got to wait till the pads come on. And the acclimation period ends tomorrow for the Eagles, so they'll be able to have the pads on Tuesday.
Okay.
Nick didn't confirm that, but I doubt he's going to. You don't have to put them on, but you're allowed to put them on for the first time. And I believe he will. And that's when we'll start getting a better feel for players like Nakobe Dean, for the running backs. When you talk about that approach, everybody looks great when they can't be tackled or even hit, because the Eagles are not going to tackle to the ground, obviously, but at least you have thump periods and things get a little bit more physical and you can kind of get a better feel. Nolan Smith, another guy, he's looked phenomenal. Today had a great pass rush and the Eagles kind of caught the defense. Jalen Hurts had a number of nice runs, quarterback draws, design plays. And Nolan is so gifted. I mean, he's rushing the passer. And then all of a sudden, Jalen gets loose. And Jalen's pretty quick himself. One of the best running quarterbacks in football. And Nolan was able to retrace and he was stride for stride with Jalen Hurts down the field, which is pretty impressive. But
Wow.
guy runs a 4.39, so. I'm very interested to see Nolan Smith against Lane Johnson. When Lane Johnson's got the pads on, then it becomes difficult.
Yeah, that is going to be fascinating, right? You brought up Rashad Penny, saying, speaking about what he spoke about, trying to stay healthy. Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis, those two guys in particular. Was there anything that stood out from those guys?
Well, I think what has stood out most, one of the things about camp, is how much Jordan Davis has played. And
Is that more than what you expected? I mean, what you have seen from the amount of snaps he's gotten, is it more than what you expected at this
a
point?
lot more. I mean, he has played a ton in the 4-man fronts. I didn't expect to see that. He's, him and Fletcher played the most in those 40 fronts. Now, part of that is, deferring to Jalen Carter, but as a rookie, starting him off slowly. So I do expect Jalen Carter to play a lot of football. But as we get into it and I see sort of the thought process here, it looks like, maybe they're going to go a little bit tighter with the inside rotation than I thought. Probably Milton Williams right now is, the odd man out. He's going to play, but he's not going to play a lot, barring injury. They want to get Jordan Davis on the field. And you knew he's going to play in the 50 fronts, but it looks like they're not going to play as much so people asking for, and I should say it's early. Nick said it 15 times today. But it looks like they're going to play less 50 fronts. And maybe that is something that will excite the fan base. Not as much as Kelly Green, but maybe it excites them a little bit.
So with JD, with Jordan Davis, you've seen him in the 4-man fronts. Have they had him at 3 technique? Have they had him at 2-eye? Like how have they placed him on that line?
Well, now it's mainly shade or 2-eye. He's not a 3 technique. That would be Fletcher in those pass rushing looks, or Jalen. And sometimes. So, it's kind of like hedging your bets a little bit. And Jordan talked about it. It's like in Georgia, that's what he did with Jalen Carter. He would take the double team, and it was Jalen's job to beat the double team. That's how they did it. And that's kind of what I think the Eagles are envisioning. So whether it's Jordan Davis engulfing blockers and making things easier for Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the edge rushers as well.
So if they're going to do less 5-man fronts, I mean, the 5-man fronts helped them defend the run much better last year. But like you said, because they're doing less of it, less guys are going to be on the field in terms of that defensive line. Milton Williams being the I-man out, does that imply Kentavious Street is currently outplaying him, or is that just a veteran decision?
No, because Kentavious would be 5. Milton's ahead of Kentavious. I mean, they're just incredible. They're just incredibly
They're so deep.
On the defensive front, almost to it becomes a problem because Milton's a good player, and how are you going to get him on the field? But if you have better players, you don't want them off the field. So it's a nice problem to have, but it does become a problem at times. We talked about it in a hypothetical sense with the receivers when a bunch of fans were all hyped up about getting DeAndre Hopkins, and I would try to talk them off the ledge and say, that's not going to work. I mean, you got to get AJ the ball. You got to get Devontae the ball. You got to get Dallas the ball. You can't add somebody like DeAndre Hopkins. It's not fantasy football. Right. Same thing on the defensive side. I mean, guys, sometimes you have depth and you have good players, but you have better players and you want the better players on the field. It's just how it works. I mean, but we all talk about this, Tone. Again, the pads have not come on. The pads will not be on until Tuesday. You talked about defending the run. That was a weakness, and I put that in quotations, of the Eagles, partially by design last year. They were willing to give up a little bit when it came to supporting the run versus defending the pass. So part of it is baked into the defensive philosophy, but if those linebackers can't hold up, well, then you got to play more 5-man fronts, especially in early downs. And if they can't, and everybody in this organization seems to have tremendous confidence in Kobe Dean. Haven't seen much.
Has he spoken about?
He spoke today. He talked a long time.
Right,
tremendous guy. Very.
But has
smart.
he spoken about the pressure he's under? Has he spoken about that pressure and how he's responding to it?
Yeah, that doesn't bother him. I mean, that part he comes from Georgia. That it doesn't bother those guys. That part of it, it's different, but they've been playing a lot of their games. They play in front of more fans under more pressure than NFL games, Alabama as well. Some of those top level SEC schools, that kind of stuff doesn't bother them. I'm talking about the ability to play at this level. And we have to see it. We haven't seen it. It's all projection right now. The Eagles seem very confident in him. But the only linebacker who's shown up over the first week of practice in any significant degree has been Christian Ellis, who is clearly the best coverage linebacker they have. But again, he's mainly playing on the second team. So you factor that into it as well. So the Eagles generally go ones against ones. Sometimes they flipped it up today. They had one session with ones versus twos, but typically they do ones versus ones, twos versus twos, and threes versus threes. So when you hear about guys splashing backup players, remember they're playing against backup players typically. Now, Christian's gotten some reps with the first team as well. And that tells you they're trying to reward him and see if he can do the same things. But, he's the guy who's made some plays. Nicholas Morrow, Jacoby Dean haven't really made many plays.
Have they made a plethora of mistakes, though? I think that's what I'm curious about, right? Like maybe they haven't had the splashy plays like Christian Ellis, but have they made sure they weren't necessarily a liability out there?
Well, on the first practice, the Eagles, they'll get mad at me for saying this, but who cares? They ran a quarterback draw off motion, where it was either, I think it was Swift, but one of the running backs motioned out, and Jacoby went with him, and it was like the Red Sea parting. I mean, he just waltzed into the end zone from about 5-6 yards out. So, that wasn't a good sign early on. Nicholas has struggled. I've seen a lot of my colleagues talking about him struggling in coverage against Dallas Goedert, but I mean,
a lot of people do.
A lot of linebackers struggle against Dallas Goedert, but so they haven't put a lot of assets in the position, and it kind of looks like they haven't put a lot of assets in the position. Is how I describe it.
Has there been a situation ever, and again, you've been covering this team since 2016. Has there been a situation where you've seen a player who hasn't really shined, in t-shirts and shorts, but as soon as he put the pads on, he's kind of taking his game to another level?
Yeah, a bunch of guys. I mean, that's how Reed Blankenship showed up. Man, Reed was like, nothing. Then the pads come on and like, oh, who's this guy? And even the coaching staff said it. As soon as the pads went on, he showed up. It's generally physical guys. The offensive line, like right now, the defensive line looks great. Just relentless. I mean, and they are. They're tremendous on paper, but I want to see them when those guys get the pads on, because when Lane gets the pads on and Jordan gets the pads on, that's their game. Landon Dickerson too, just a big physical guy. And they start to beat up a little bit on the defensive line. Now but that's like strength versus strength. Right. The good part about the Eagles defensive line is they don't have to work against the Eagles offensive line in games. So it's only going to help them. But when you hear the stories of Nolan Smith, because of his speed and his athleticism, well, Nolan Smith is made for t-shirts and shorts. and they have jerseys on, but you get my
Right.
point. I mean, he's made for it. Is he made? He's 238 pounds. Is he made for a big NFL right tackle getting his hands on him? We're going to have to see. That's what we're going to have to see. Now, he's better than people realize at Georgia in run support. But even Georgia's a big step up to the NFL.
Right. You know, speaking of the offensive line, you know, is there any update on that right guard competition? You know, can you enlighten us on any movement you've seen in terms of who's been getting more first team snaps, who's been getting you know, more of the second team snaps when it comes to Tyler Steen and Cam Jurgens? Who's kind of, you know, been leading the charge with, you know, with that position?
Cam has gotten every single first team rep, so you know, but it's kind of the opposite with him versus the rest of the offensive linemen. We want to see the pads on with him as well, and Nick specifically said that today when talking about Cam Jurgens. You know, can he hold up at right guard? But right now he's taking every single first team rep. Kelsey hasn't had a maintenance day yet. So, you know, they've been doing practice off day. It'll be interesting. They have a walkthrough tomorrow. Tuesday, that's the end of the acclimation period. Tuesday, they can put the pads on. They're off Wednesday. Then their first back-to-back Thursday and Friday. My guess would be Jason would get Friday off, but we'll see. And, you know, right now Cam's gotten every first team rep and Tyler Steen's gotten every second team rep. So you would have to say Cam is still the significant favorite at this stage.
Have you seen anything in terms of the young corners, right? The guys behind Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and Avonte Maddox. Have any of those guys been, you know, making, you know, having any flashy plays, or have you seen the rotations changing or the depth chart changing? You know, who have you seen getting more reps than the other, so on and so forth?
Well, the top three are set, but Avonte's been working his way back from surgery. Is back and did a little bit of work in team drills today for the first time. Then he got banged up again with that toe, and last thing you want is to him have a setback. But he was able to return to practice. So the top three is set. So it becomes and Zach McPherson, they've moved him to the slot. And he's going to be.
You've been talking about that for a few, you know, for a couple seasons now. You know, he's just better suited there.
Yeah, I mean it fits him better. He played it in college a lot, but the Eagles didn't have a lot of depth. People forget when they drafted him that entire offseason, we were looking at him cross-eyed. They were saying, "Yeah, Zach's going to start. And we're like, you're going to throw a fourth-round pick and be a starting outside corner in the NFL? People have done it, but usually it doesn't end up very well. And they ended up signing Steve Nelson. I think it was 2 days before training camp. And on the first rep of training camp, there was Steven Nelson. And he played every single game in the regular season, playoffs. So, and then this past offseason, they got Bradbury late, or some not as late, but in he obviously became the starter. And the thing is, both Bradbury and Slay played all 20 games. The year before, Darius got nicked up a couple times, but he played the vast majority of the season. Nelson played every game, was completely healthy. So Zach never got an opportunity to play outside, except in mop-up duty. And as I said, when Slay had they thought he had a concussion issue at some point in 2 games, and he played a few snaps here and there, but not much at all. So he never got a chance out there, and now they have better depth. So, Greedy Williams and Josh Jobe have been sort of the first guys off the bench when it comes to the outside corners. Kaylee Ringo is going to make the team, though.
Right.
They're just starting them out slow. I tell you that if you want a young player, Mekhi Gardner, who was another, they have all these big, and people are focused on Eli Ricks because he had the bigger name in college.
Yeah, Garner's what, like 6'2", right? 200 plus pounds?
6'2", 215. He got his hands on Olamide Zaccheaus in one-on-ones today, completely rerouted him. And he did the same thing to Tyree Cleveland. Again, backup players against backup players. But he's a guy who not going to make the 53, but they're going to try to get him on the practice squad, and who knows down the road. But they have so much depth at corner with live bodies. We don't know if any of them can play, though. I mean,
Right.
Greedy Williams, big reputation, didn't live up to it in Cleveland. Josh Jobe was here last year. Eli Ricks, as I said, was a 5-star recruit coming into college, never lived up to it, but has got significant physical skills. I just mentioned Garner. Calais Ringo is off the charts physically.
Right.
Also 6'2". They're all 6'2". It's like a zombie army of long corners. And that's what people are looking for. The Eagles got a lot of darts. So the more darts you can throw at the board, maybe one hits.
Yeah, the Eagles are definitely starting to follow that trend. They're clearly making all the efforts to shift the profile of cornerbacks they recruited in the past. I want to shift gears myself towards special teams. Special teams, we all know, has been the Achilles heel of the Philadelphia Eagles. It reared its ugly head in the Super Bowl, but just staying current, what's been your observations thus far in terms of who's been getting a lot of the punt returns, kick returns? How's that so-called punter competition going? Can you give us any updates, any observations that you have from the special teams?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a competition at punter, and if there is, it's going to be from outside the organization. I mean, Aaron Cepas is clearly the stronger leg guy, but that's always been Aaron's, excuse me. No one ever questioned his leg strength or anything like that. With him, it's about consistency, as you saw in the Super Bowl, punting the ball where you're supposed to, because the worst thing you can do. It's very similar. Nobody cares about special teams, so nobody pays attention. But it's sort of like the first rule of thumb when you're talking about receivers and quarterbacks is you cannot fool the quarterback. In other words, you have to be where you're supposed to be, because it can get ugly if you stop on a route or get something. Same thing in punt coverage. If you have a certain coverage on and the punter punts it the other way, you don't know. You're trying to beat blocks and get down the field and do what was called. And all of a sudden, the football's on the other side of the field, and it looks like a fire drill. So it's big. Now, I'll also say this: I think the Eagles made a mistake and did a disservice to Aaron because he was hurt in the Giants game. At the time, we thought it was a season-ending injury. Right. He did not punt in the prior 6 games. Leading up to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And he worked his way back, and I think it was one of those things where they wanted to reward him for working so hard, but he probably wasn't ready to punt.
Do you also think it was because
a rush standpoint?
Right. Do you also think it was because Jake Elliott is extremely comfortable with Aaron Cepas being his placeholder? Right. And so do you think they maybe wanted to eliminate any kind of error that could potentially happen by having someone new out there in the event they may need a game-winning kick or a key field goal?
I mean, they were fine. Yeah, Jake likes him as a holder, but they were fine. I mean, Brett Kern was there for 6 games.
Right.
You worked through it. There was no glaring errors when it came to holding or Jake having an issue leading up to that. So
Right.
sometimes you overthink yourself, and Nick has said that. Other coaches have said it with the extra time, paralysis by analysis. Sometimes you overthink it with the extra time. I think they overthought the punter. They should have just let, Brett Kern didn't punt well, but he wasn't going to punt it, you know, the opposite direction of what he should have. So might have been a bad punt. Probably wouldn't have been as bad as it turned out. I think the Eagles did Sipas a little bit of a disservice. And the only reason I bring that up is he's a much better punter than Ty Zettner. So Ty Zettner's not beating him out.
Got it. All right, final question before we get out of here, John. Once again, I appreciate you. I appreciate you guys as well, locked into the live stream. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Continue to stay engaged. You guys are locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tony. It's just a second. This is JAKIB Sports. John, really quickly, let's go to the quarterback position. Jalen Hurts, obviously, he is the guy. That big contract will say that. So, any observations when it comes to Jalen Hurts? Any ups, any downs, anything that may anything that caught your attention today?
Yeah, had a great day today. I mean, today was, I think a lot of people, and I've said it on the show, we do these shows after every practice. I mean, the first practice was heavy red zone, so short areas, short fields, really everything stifled in the short windows. And you're working on specific things. And I asked Nick about that today. It also, is part of their ramp up sort of theory in that, not only do you want to take it slow with the guys hitting the field at in the first practice, but you also have to worry about how long they're running. So they wanted those controlled, those short fields, those small fields, because they didn't want guys blowing out their hamstring running all out 40, 50, 60 yards. So
Right.
All of that factors into it. So the passing game was not a big part of practice 1. Practice 2 was more about the running game, so it wasn't a big part of it. Today was third down jamboree day, so it was a big part. And the ball didn't hit the ground much today.
Third down jamboree day. So can you provide some more details to me and the viewers to exactly what exactly is third down jamboree day?
It's basically a competitive period where you have increments. You have a 3rd and 4, a 3rd and 7, a 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, and
Okay.
you get points, and it's offense versus defense. And third down, the most important down in football. And the offense won today pretty significantly. They did a really good job converting. As I said, I don't have the numbers. That's Elliott's job. But the ball didn't hit the ground much today when Jalen Hurts was throwing it. I will say that.
Hey, that's what we like to hear. The more and more, or the less rather, Jalen Hurts becomes a story. That just means that he's trending in the direction of he's just becoming so consistent that covering him is kind of boring. You know what I'm saying? So I think I think ultimately that's what Eagles fans want. They want Jalen Hurts to become so consistent that covering him becomes boring at this point. Thank you, John. I appreciate you, man. Is there any final thoughts, any final words, any updates, anything that you're working on that's going to be coming out soon that you want to promote? And also, can you provide us and provide the fans any updates in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles when it comes to the schedule?
Well, as I said, tomorrow's a walkthrough. Tomorrow's the end of what's called the acclimation period, which is collectively bargained between the league and the NFLPA. So it's not like the Eagles have any choice in the matter. They're not allowed to have the pads on until Tuesday. That is the first day They will be allowed to put on the pads. I expect him to be on, even though Nick didn't confirm that today. They expect him to be on for the first time Tuesday, so that's a big day. And then they'll ramp down again because they're going to have a green practice on Tuesday, and they're going to have a day off Wednesday, and then first back-to-back practices Thursday and Friday. So it's a big week. Hassan Reddick, I should have mentioned, was back doing some individual work.
Okay.
So that's a positive. He has missed. He had missed the first two practices. Still not in team drills or anything like that, but obviously they're being very, very cautious with him. And guys who got banged up, Landon Dickerson had to leave for a little bit, but he returned. I mentioned Maddox. He returned. Deion Kane, who's been, in my opinion, the best of the back end receivers on the roster. He got a little bit shaken up, but he was able to return. So pretty healthy team right now.
Really quickly, you brought up Deion Kane. I got to squeeze this in, John. He's someone that I'm very interested in, and I know he was on the roster last year during training camp and during the preseason. And
he was on the practice squad the last 2 years, partially.
Right. I vividly remember him having some pretty good moments, especially in that Eagles-Browns matchup. And he obviously had a lot of great moments in the USFL. And he's turned it to kind of like this return specialist in the USFL. I'm curious if you think he has a chance of making this roster as a guy who maybe can compete with Brenton Covey in returning punts and kicks, because
not happening.
Wow.
I know Eagles fan for whatever reason. Britton's one of those guys. First of all, Britton is came back. Britton looks really a lot quicker, a lot more confident in his short area stuff as a receiver. Obviously because of his slide, his size. For people that didn't notice, Britton had a really good end of the season as a punt returner. And the Eagles were starting. I think a lot of people don't realize the Eagles were struggling in the punt return game before Britton got here. Jalen Reagor.
No comment.
And the thing about Jalen, God, I root for Jalen because he's a nice guy, and I think he's misunderstood and tremendously talented, but too many mental errors. The ball security was not bad, was not good with him. So he just wanted so good. They weren't really concerned about, finding out the explosive punt return game. That as the season went on, they started saying, you know what, this guy's pretty good. And all of a sudden they started giving him a little bit more rope, and he was making some plays and having some good returns. And he's the punt returner. And barring injury, he ain't losing that job. And to your point, the guys who are back there, basically they rotate 4 or 5 guys in practice when they do punt returns. Deion Kane hasn't even taken a rep. It's Greg Ward. It's Quez Watkins. I have no idea why they put Quez back there. Devontae Smith in big situations. Now, Devontae can do it, but they don't want to risk Devontae. Now, if you're down 7 and you need a big punt return, they might put Devontae. They've done that high leverage situation. They might do that, but Britton Covey's the punt returner. Lock it in.
All right, I'll lock it in. The little what did Lane Justin call him last year? A little dingo back there running around. So, man, John, I appreciate you, man. You guys continue to smash that like button and continue to lock in on all the content JAKIB Sports has to offer. There's so much more to come. Tomorrow, as you guys already know, 8 a.m. Eastern time, bright and early, we have Birds 365. 12 p.m. Eastern time, we have Sports Take with Derek Gunn and Rob Ellis. Also, Jody Mack and John McMullen on Bird 65, like I said, at 8 a.m. Eastern time and 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have our guy, Dan Cilio, doing his thing on the National Football Show. So make sure you guys continue to stay locked in. The content is going to continue to flow from JAKIB Sports. And make sure you guys look up John on jakibsports.com. It's JAKIB sports.com. John does an amazing job covering your Philadelphia Eagles, and he's one of the best in the market. Let's just call it what it is. He's one of the most objective, one of the best, one of the most astute when it comes to covering your Philadelphia Eagles. No matter how you feel about his objectivity, because he's going to give it to you straight, no chaser. Okay, he's not going to give you any fluff. He's not going to give you a pat on the back. He's not going to coddle you. He's going to tell you exactly what he saw and his perspective, and that's what I love the most about John. You can't finesse him. You can't sneak one in there where he's going to give that team.
You just tried with Deion Kane being the punt returner.
See, I always got to try. What's life without trying, right? If you don't try, you already failed. So you guys, make sure you lock in. This has been Football 24/7 with John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II on JAKIB Sports. Take care, you guys.